What you are about to hear happened in a small town in Tennessee, and it forever transformed everyone who witnessed it. At the door of a century-old church, an abandoned sick and dying dog did something so extraordinary that no one could explain it. He did not ask for food. He did not ask for shelter. He simply prostrated himself in silence before the image of the Virgin Mary. Some called it instinct, others coincidence. But for those who were there, it was a sign from heaven. This is the story of Max, the dog who learned to pray, and then the impossible happened. And perhaps as you listen to this story, you too will discover that the greatest miracles come from the most unexpected places. Before we continue, I want to ask you a sincere question. Are you ready to answer Mary's call for your life? If your answer is yes, comment, "I'm ready." And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because here, miracles happen every day. It was a rainy September morning. The clock showed just after 6 when Sarah Mitchell, a 68-year-old retired nurse, left her home with her worn umbrella. Every day at the same hour, she walked to the small church in the heart of town to say her prayers. But that morning, something different awaited her. On the church's doorstep, drenched by the rain, lay a dog, a skinny stray, his fur dull, his body trembling. His eyes were half closed, yet in them remained an expression impossible to forget, deep pain mixed with a silent plea. Sarah approached slowly. "My heart broke at that moment," she recalled years later. It was as if that animal had lost everything, and had only found the church as his last refuge. The dog barely had the strength to lift his head. When Sarah knelt and stretched out her hand, he let out a faint sigh, rested his snout on her palm, and remained still, as if he had finally found rest. In that moment, Sarah made a decision. She would not let him die alone at that door. Without thinking twice, she lifted the animal in her arms. Even fragile, he seemed an impossible weight, as though he carried all the sadness of the world. And under the relentless rain, she crossed the square toward the town's veterinary office, that of Dr. James Thompson. There would begin the battle for Max's life. Dr. James Thompson's office was only a few blocks from the church. Sarah arrived soaked, carrying the dog in her arms. The veterinarian, with more than 30 years of experience, needed only a few seconds to realize the seriousness of the situation. Max, as Sarah decided to name him, was in critical condition. Severe malnutrition, infection spread throughout his body, profound dehydration. To be honest, Dr. Thompson admitted later, "I didn't believe he would survive the first night. It was one of the worst cases of abandonment I had ever seen." Sarah heard the diagnosis in silence. The doctor's words sounded like a sentence. But in her heart, something burned strongly, a certainty that the dog had not stopped at the church door by chance. "I won't give up on him," she replied firmly. "As long as there is a breath of life, I will fight by his side." And so began an exhausting routine, almost impossible for someone her age. Every 2 hours, Sarah got up to feed him small portions, prepared medications according to the veterinarian's instructions, cleaned his wounds, warmed his fragile body with heated cloths, and above all, prayed for him. The nights were long. Many times Max breathed so slowly it seemed he would not survive until morning. Sarah would then kneel by the small improvised bed and say in a low voice, "Lord, if this is your purpose, then help me care for this creature until the end. But if there is still hope, give him strength to live." And little by little, against all predictions, Max began to respond. First a slight movement of his ear when he heard Sarah's voice. Then a more attentive gaze, as if recognizing the presence that never abandoned him. And then, on an autumn afternoon, he managed to take his first steps inside the house. Sarah cried that day as she had not cried since losing her husband, because she knew that moment marked not just the recovery of a dog, but the beginning of something greater, something no one imagined. On the third week of care, when Max was already able to walk more steadily, Sarah noticed something that left her intrigued. Every morning, always at 6 a.m., the dog left his little bed, walked slowly to the church door, and sat there staring intently. At first she thought it was just curiosity, but there was something in that gaze, something deep, as if Max knew there was a mystery calling him. One morning, Sarah decided to open the church door and see what would happen. Max walked in slowly, ignoring the people in prayer, ignoring the wooden pews and the central table. His steps had a clear destination. He went straight to the altar, where for more than 100 years stood the image of the Virgin Mary. There, before the mother of Jesus, Max did something everyone remembers to this day. He lay down flat on his belly, stretched both front paws forward, lowered his head until it touched the ground, and remained still. It was as if he had prostrated himself in prayer. The women of the congregation, accustomed to seeing that altar silent on cold mornings, covered their mouths in astonishment. Mary Rodriguez, responsible for cleaning the church, testified, "I saw it with my own eyes. He wasn't just lying down. He was praying, just like we do before the Blessed Mother." Minutes passed, then half an hour, and Max stayed there in complete serenity, as if in deep contemplation. Father William Murphy, who was leading the prayer that day, was left speechless. Later, when he tried to describe it, he said, "I have seen people doubt. I have seen people come in here without faith. But never, in all these years, have I seen a creature surrender like that before the Virgin Mary. It was as if Our Lady were teaching us through him what true devotion is." At that moment, Sarah understood. Max had not found the church door by chance. He had been guided to the feet of Mary to show that even an animal can recognize the presence of the Mother of Heaven. And that was only the first of many signs to come. After that first day before the image of Mary, everyone thought it was just an isolated event, a curious gesture from a dog that was still recovering. But they were wrong. The next morning, exactly at 6 a.m., Max repeated the ritual. He left Sarah's house, crossed the silent square, entered the church, and slowly walked up to the altar. And there, before the Virgin Mary, he once again prostrated himself in deep reverence. Once, then again, and again, every single day. Rain or shine, in bitter cold or scorching heat, Max never failed. For a full hour, he remained still, head bowed, as if offering his own prayers to the Mother of Jesus. It was like a spiritual clock, said Father Murphy. Every day, at the exact same time, he placed himself before Our Lady. I've never seen such constancy, not even in many human believers. The first parish ladies began bringing candles to light beside him. Some children, curious, imitated his prayer posture. Soon, the church that used to remain almost empty in the early mornings began to welcome more and more visitors. The priest decided to discreetly record with his phone to show those who still doubted. When the videos were shared on social media, something unexpected happened. They went viral. Within just a few weeks, people from nearby towns were traveling hours just to see, with their own eyes, the dog who prayed before Mary. Caravans began arriving. Entire families entered the church in silence, awed by the serenity of the animal before the altar. And the more people came, the clearer it became. Max did not get distracted. He did not move. He did not fidget. He remained completely surrendered, as if his heart was speaking to the Blessed Mother in a way human words could not express. Sarah, moved, often repeated the same phrase to those who asked, "It's not just Max who is praying. It is Our Lady calling us back through him." The little abandoned mutt had become a living symbol, a reminder that true faith is simple, silent, yet irresistibly powerful. And then the first reports began to appear of people deeply touched by that moment of prayer. The testimony that marked the city began in a simple way. One Sunday, Robert and Linda Hayes arrived from a trip with their 9-year-old daughter, Emma. Emma had been born deaf. She had never heard her mother's voice nor the song of birds. The family had already tried doctors, treatments, hearing devices. Nothing seemed to work. "When we saw the video of Max praying before the image of Our Lady," said Linda, "we felt we had to come. It was as if Mary herself was calling us." That morning the little church was silent. The candles flickered before the altar, and Max was already prostrated, as he always did, before the image of the Virgin Mary. Emma watched attentively. She approached, knelt beside the dog, and imitating him, she also lowered her head. The next day she returned. She did the same thing, sat near Max, picked up the little stones, and kept gazing at the face of Mary. Again, complete silence. But there was something different. For the first time in a long while, her parents saw peace in their daughter's eyes. On the third visit, there was no need to insist. It was Emma who asked to return. She would run to the altar, sit next to Max, and stay there for hours, repeating the same ritual with the stones, as if she were learning to pray with him. "It was as if Mary were slowly preparing her heart," said the mother. "It was all gentle, discreet. But each day my daughter came back home different." Just as Max had taught the community to kneel in silence, now he was also teaching little Emma to remain before Mary day after day until the right moment arrived. Until one winter morning, something changed. While everyone prayed in silence, a small accident occurred. One of the stones slipped from Emma's hand and struck the marble floor with a sharp sound. The girl instinctively raised her head. Her eyes widened, as if she had perceived something. It was not a word. It was not a clear sound. But for the first time it seemed her ears had captured something new. Linda, the mother, later recounted with tears, "She looked at me as she had never looked before. She didn't need to say anything. I knew that. In that instant, Our Lady was opening a path within her." That very day, Emma reacted to small noises inside the church, the dragging of a bench, the soft sound of a candle falling. Each noise seemed to find its way into her ears. The news spread quickly. Doctors were called. Tests were repeated. And to this day, no one has been able to explain how a girl who was born deaf suddenly began to hear before the image of the Virgin Mary in prayer beside a dog. The faithful had no doubts. What science could not justify, faith recognized as a miracle. Mary had touched that child in a way no specialist could ever understand. After Emma's testimony, Max's story was no longer just a curiosity. Every morning at exactly 6 o'clock, the faithful gathered in the small church to witness that silent moment before the Blessed Mother. Women praying the rosary, young people who rarely approached the altar, men who had not gone to confession for years, returning with tears in their eyes. Max, motionless before the image of Mary, attracted not only gazes, he attracted hearts. "He did not preach with words," said Father Murphy, "but his posture reminded us that Our Lady continues calling her children closer to God." The news quickly spread beyond the limits of the city. Caravans began to arrive, candles multiplied before the altar, and testimonies of received graces spread everywhere. A shopkeeper summarized the feeling of awe. "Our square was empty. Now, since Max began his ritual, the city breathes faith again. This is not tourism. It is pilgrimage." As the years went by, Max never failed to fulfill his routine. Every day, at 6 in the morning, he crossed the silent square and prostrated himself before the Virgin Mary. Neither cold nor rain, nor the weariness of age ever stopped him. For the people, the answer was always clear. Mary chose the unlikely to rekindle the faith of a generation that no longer believed in miracles. Sarah, the woman who rescued him, always said, "Max is not the miracle. The miracle is Mary, who calls us every day through him. An abandoned animal that found before the mother of Jesus an eternal purpose. The story of Max is a living reminder that miracles have not ended. They happen every day, when we open our hearts to the love of the Blessed Mother. Now tell me, what happened with Max? Was it a miracle, an instinct, or a sign you needed to see today? Share your opinion in the comments. Leave a like if this story strengthened your faith. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next miracles, and may the Virgin Mary bless your path.